Let me introduce our next speaker, Dr. Somnath Jadhav. Dr. Jadhav did his MSc from the University of Kalyani, received his PhD award from the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science under Dr. Professor Shashwati Lahiri, and he did his postdoctoral study from National Tsinghua University, Taiwan. His current area of research are carbohydrate synthesis, supramolecular gel, organic photochemistry. We are eagerly waiting for his informative and vibrant lecture. Please welcome Dr. Jadhav to deliver his lecture. Dr. Jadhav, please.
Thank you, Swastikda. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll present my entire screen now. Okay, so is the slide visible?
Oh, not yet.
No.
Okay. No, okay, I have started presenting. Okay, let's see. Okay, is it visible now?
No.
Now?
Yes.
Now it's okay. Yeah. Okay, ma'am. Make it full screen.
Oh yeah, I'll make it full screen. But is it visible now? Okay, so
Yeah.
is it okay?
Yes.
Right now it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Swastikda, once again, and I thank the principal for Boshirat College for giving me this opportunity. I also thank the convener of IQAC, the organizers, particularly Monojit Da, as well as Swastikda once again. Thank you once again. Okay, so I'll begin my presentation today. So at IIT ISM Dhanbad, what we do is we basically in our lab we work on carbohydrate synthesis, and I'll tell you about our journey, a part of our journey on carbohydrate synthesis towards crude oil spill remediation through supramolecular gelation.
Once again, Somnath, I am interrupting. Just put your slide in presenting mode and make it full screen.
It's already in full screen. It is already in full screen.
Yeah, but put it in presentation mode. Okay.
I have put it in presentation mode. Okay.
Okay, you can proceed.
No, it's okay.
So is it?
Hello.
So am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible, but still we are not seeing this.
But your slide is not visible.
My slide is not visible. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
No.
Not yet.
Okay, so I have to start sharing again. Okay, I was sharing. Now I have to start sharing again. Present now. Okay. So is it visible now?
It's now clear. It's now clear.
It's not clear. Okay. Okay. So what I'll do is, yeah. Hello. Just a minute. Hello. Okay. Okay. So I thought it was from one of you. Okay. So now what happens is, what is going to happen? I'll be presenting our part of our journey, part of our research on the remediation of oil spills through supramolecular gelation. Okay, so before I begin, at IIT ISM Dhanbad, what we do is basically we work on carbohydrate chemistry, and as part of working on a carbohydrate projects, we make oligosaccharides, particularly some of the capsular capsular oligosaccharides of bacteria for vaccine applications. So because this is a audience where there will be many people from other departments as well as non-chemistry people, I thought I would deliver my talk today on something of relevance that is very important in today's perspective. If you look at it, oil spills have caused major ecological damage in many times, in several times over the past few decades. What is an oil spill? Oil spill is basically uncontrolled release of crude oil, gasoline, fuels, or other byproducts of oil into the environment. This can take place in land, air, or water, but the major ones are those that happens to occur in oceans and over oil. Some of the severest ones that I have listed them is the Persian Gulf oil spill that occurred during the Kuwait War. It released around 380 to 520 million gallons of crude oil into the ocean. Deepwater Horizon, it occurred in our recent times in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. It released 134 million gallons of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The ITOC oil spill, it was way before us, 1979, in the Bay of Campeche. 126 to 140 million gallons of oil was lost into the sea. Now, if you look at it, this is a huge volume of oil that is dispersed into the environment, and it causes massive environmental damage. Now, the total estimates that of the oil loss, the crude oil spill that is estimated according to Encyclopedia Britannica is 3.5 million to 6 million tons per year. Now, this is a huge amount. So unless it is checked, unless the methods are checked, it could lead to severe environmental damage. Now, how is the oil spill contained? If you look at it, the containment of the spread of oil involves, first you have to prevent the oil from spreading. So you have to somehow put physical barriers or something else so that the spread of the oil is limited. Now, the second thing that has to be done is to remove the oil from the spilled area. Okay, for this purpose, and thirdly, it is not always possible, but if you are able to recover the oil, then it is best. Otherwise, it has to be degraded. Traditionally, the techniques that are used for such oil spill remediations are, as I said, putting physical barriers like booms to restrict the spread of the oil. The second method used is using sorbents. These are basically absorbents that absorb the oil and then it is removed from the surface of the sea or from the surface of the land. The third one is for using dispersants. So what happens is that if it is a limited amount, it disperses the oil over the surface and ultimately the oil evaporates and degrades. So that is the third method. The fourth method for this is skimming the oil, just removing. You just skim it off, like skimming the cream from the milk. You skim it off from the surface and then you recover the oil. The third one, not very useful from an environmental perspective, but nevertheless used, is to burn up the fuel. Okay, burn up the crude oil. The third one, and the last one, bioremediation techniques, which use some kind of bacteria and other microorganisms that oil-eating bacteria that eat up the oil and degrade the oil. Now, if you remember, there was an oil spill somewhere in last couple of years in Tamil Nadu, Chennai. There was an oil tanker that collided with another ship, and then oil was spilled. So what happens during real world applications is that a combination of all of these techniques are generally used for the remediation of the oil spill. But each of these has its own limitations, and so newer methods are always welcome. Now, a recent technique for remediation of oil spills is to convert the liquid fluid oil into a solid and then recover it. So it has a few advantages over the other ones. It allows if you are able to solidify this crude oil, what happens is you control the spread of the spilled oil. Secondly, if it is a solid, you can remove it very easily. And third, if it is a solid, you can remove it and then you can melt it, distill it, and recover the petroleum distillates from this. So this is one of the new techniques that has come up in the 21st century that is being used. Now, how it is done? Basically, the solidifiers of oils are of two kinds: sorbents and gelators. The sorbents, this has been used for some time now. They act on the oil by absorbing them. Either it is absorbed on the surface or it is absorbed into the bulk of the material. On the other hand, the gelators solidify the crude oil by a mechanism called gelation. All of us are aware of gelation. I'll not go into the details, but the gelators are of two kinds: macromolecular or chemical gelators, which are basically cross-linked polymers. The cross-linked polymers have pores in between them where it traps the liquid oil and then it becomes a solid, just like a gel, the hair gel, the toothpaste gel that we have, and then it can be removed. On the other hand, we have supramolecular gelators. Now, these are also called physical gelators because the 3D network that is formed for the entrapment of the solvent is formed through supramolecular assemblies. So these are basically small molecules, low molecular weight compounds, which self-assemble and form a 3D network, and in which the crude oil or any other solvent is trapped. So low molecular weight organogelators, these are what they are called because crude oil is an organic material. So low molecular organogelators, they self-assemble and they are used to solidify the oil, which can be removed very easily. This is a very recent concept. If you look at it, this concept is not very recent. Professor Shantanu Bhattacharya from ISC Bangalore, he first published a paper about the possibility of remediation of oil spills in the year 2001 by using a low molecular weight compound. It is a N-lauryl L-alanine, and this is a gelator. This is a small molecule. It self-assembles in a variety of solvents. It also is able to gel some petroleum distillates like petrol, diesel, kerosene, etc. So what he did was he proved that these kind of low molecular weight gelators can gel petroleum distillates. And this was followed up by some other work, some other publications from other groups, for example, Banerjee and co-workers, Prashanto Das and Partho Sridhar and all. So they all did the work on petroleum distillates. Now, the problem lies elsewhere. The problem is that it is good. Petroleum distillates are relatively pure. They are fractionates of petroleum and they have basically all the alkanes. So it is relatively easy to gel petroleum distillates. However, crude oil is a very different aspect. It has different polyaromatic hydrocarbons. It has different minerals. Even some trace minerals are also present. A fair amount of sodium and potassium salts. And because of this, gelation of crude oil is different from the gelation of petroleum distillates like petrol, diesel, etc. So this was not there. Now at IIT ISM Dhanbad, we have a very strong petroleum and mineral engineering department. And as you know, Indian School of Mines, it has a rich legacy in petroleum engineering. So for us, because I was working here, for me it was a challenge to be able to gel and to work on this aspect. So we started our journey on this. So, but before I go into this, let us introduce ourselves to the concept of supramolecular gelators. As I told you before, small molecules that can self-assemble in a variety of solvents, forming a 3D network, which can then entrap solvents. Now, this kind of small molecules that are there are steroids, folic acids, peptides, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, long alkyl chain bearing molecules, ureas and thioureas, nucleosides, dendrimers and carbohydrates. Of course, our area of interest was carbohydrates. Now, how this self-assembly forms? This is all basic chemistry, but this is, I'll tell you nevertheless because of some of the students in the audience. The self-assembly means the stacking together of molecules. The stacking together of molecules to form the 3D network through physical non-covalent forces like van der Waals forces, hydrogen bonding, hydrophobic interactions, pi-pi interactions, CH-pi interactions, dipole-dipole interactions, as well as sometimes halogen bonding. So this kind of interactions lead to, if you look at it, okay, I have a slide after this where I'll talk about this in details. So what happens is basically you have molecules forming some kind of ordered structure, and in between those molecular linkings, you have spaces which is occupied by the liquid, resulting in semi-solid or sometimes, depending on the nature of this, solid form, which is known as gel. Okay, so yeah, this is this. So what happens basically is that for the traditional procedure for making gels is that you have a hot supersaturated solution of a compound in a particular solvent, and then this is made by adding some amount of compound to the solution. It is initially insoluble, the compound is initially insoluble, and then you heat it up to make it soluble. Once you let it cool, there can be three things happening in that. There could be three things happening in that. The first one is that on cooling, because it is a supersaturated solution, the excess salt, the compound that is there in the solution, gets precipitated in an amorphous form. That is one scenario. In the second scenario, what happens is that it goes into a very, very ordered structure, and that results in a formation of crystals. In between these two extremes, one is typically random, that is precipitation, one is very, very ordered, that is crystal formation. In between this, what could happen is that you could have a balanced structure in which there is a partial ordered structure present and a lot of amorphous phase present in the solid that is precipitated. So this leads to a network. So this occurs through formation of initial individual fibers. These individual fibers then form fiber bundles. Okay, so they align together to form bundles, and these bundles are just get entangled. And once this entanglement happens, a lot of space is available in between the different fiber bundles, where the liquid could be trapped, and this could result in the formation of the gel. So this is basically what happens. So it is partially ordered, partially disordered. It is intermediate in between the precipitation, totally amorphous precipitation, and the totally crystalline crystal formation. So this is the possibility that leads to the gelatin. Now, because of our interest, let me introduce you to the different types of classes of carbohydrate-based gelators. If you look at it, there are basically all the work that has been reported, most of the work, 99% of the work that has been reported on carbohydrate-based gelators is based on the hexose sugars. There are basically three strategies for making or designing hexose sugar-based gelators. Now, for designing gelators, it is not a very scientific art. What is known, it is a very difficult job. Lots of people have worked on how to design gelators and how to make gelators on command. But this is far away from reality. So basically, you have to make a group of molecules, test them, and then do it, and then see if they work or not. So the first strategy that people have used is to protect the 4 and 6 hydroxyl groups of a hexose sugar, say glucose, galactose, or even mannose, with a benzylidine or some aryl aldehyde. Okay, and then you introduce protecting groups under C2 and C3 hydroxyls, and the anomeric is protected as either a thioglycoside or a normal methyl or alkyl glycoside. So this class of chelators have an obvious disadvantage in the sense that they are not very stable under acidic conditions because of this labile benzylidine protection. Okay, so this is the first class. The second class is amphiphilic. Amphiphilic means they love both water and other solvents. So you need a balance between the hydrophobic nature and the hydrophilic nature of a compound to make them act as chelators. So what do they do is basically they have a native sugar and they link the native sugar through glycosides to aliphatic chains, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, aromatic amino acids, ureas, thioureas, most of the classes of compounds, and then this acts as the hydrophobic part and this acts as the hydrophilic part, and then you have a balance of the different parameters, and then you get chelators. So this is again a trial and error method. It depends on the chain length of this aliphatic chain or the amino acid or the alkyl group on the amino acid, and also other things. There's a third class which is acyclic sugar based. Now acyclic sugar based are generally acyclic sugars can be very easily converted into their uronic acids, and then you form esters with them or imines with them with the native sugar, imines with the native sugar and esters of the uronic acids, and then you link aliphatic chains, amino acids, anything else, and then you get balance of hydrophobic and hydrophilic elements, and then you get your low molecular weight chelator. Now, moving on to the next slide, these are some of the examples of the previously reported and carbohydrate-based chelators. These are based on mostly hexose sugar, sorbitol, mannitol, glucose, galactose, mannose, glucosamine, galactosamine. You also have some derivatives of them, and mannose and galactosamine is a little bit rare. Sorbitol and mannitol, they are extensively used in the food industry, and their chelators are extensively used in the consumer goods industry and in the food industry. These are more complicated ones, the 10A and B, and these have some limited applications. So now, moving on to our work, we were basically working on arabinos. Now, as I told you before, our interest was primarily carbohydrate synthesis and oligosaccharide synthesis. We were trying to make arabinose derivative, and the first step in that was protection of the 3,4 hydroxyl groups as an acetonide. This is a standard reaction in carbohydrate chemistry. We're using 2,2-dimethoxypropane, and then if you use it at low temperature, at room temperature, and you use one equivalent of this 2,2-dimethoxypropane, you get a monoprotection 3,4 acetonide. This 1,2 hydroxyl groups are not protected. This can also be done. You have to be careful about the temperature. If you heat it up, it goes into the diacetonide form. So what we did was we used the D-arabinose. Now there's an interesting thing why we were working on D-arabinose, arabinose itself. We treated this and then we got this monoacetonide. We did the same thing for the L-arabinose and then we got this too. And how this happened was, this is an interesting story because the column chromatography, this is a very polar compound, and the column chromatography doesn't work with basic general solvents that we use for column chromatography like petroleum ether, ethyl acetate or diethyl ether. The column chromatography had to be done in benzene methanol and very small amounts of 5% of methanol. So what happened was after the column chromatography, during the evaporation process, when most of the methanol had been removed and little bit of benzene remained in the round bottom flask, what happened was it solidified. It led to a gel. This was an interesting observation by my student Raj Kamal. He was my first PhD student, and then he said, "Sir, this is a gel." And then we started looking. So this was a serendipitous discovery. And then once we got interest, once we knew that this was able to form gel, it was very interesting because, as you can see, the previous gelators that we had needed considerable synthetic manipulations starting from the raw materials to be prepared. Now, in this case, it was a one-step preparation. D and L arabinols are both available in nature in nature, unlike some of the other sugars that we know. For example, if you have glucose, glucose is available in nature only in the D form. It's not available in the L form. So our basic interest was to make chiral organocatalysts out of D and L arabinols. So enantiomeric chiral catalyst. So that's what we were working on, and that's how we started with it. But then what happened was, after we got the gel in benzene, we tested it for other solvents. We tested it for so many solvents: benzene, toluene, mostly aromatic hydrocarbon solvents, and then we found that it was able to gel them. And the gelation minimum gelation concentration, this is the 0.5% that is in the figures that I have see here, is the minimum gelation concentration. That is the minimum weight of compound to gel a particular volume of liquid. So it is noted here as a weight by volume percentage, and you see 0.5% for all these solvents is pretty much low. So this was interesting. If you look at typical gelation concentrations that were reported at that time, were around 2%, 3% of weight by volume. This was interesting. So once we found this result, we got this result, we were interested in trying to find applications where to do this, where to apply this kind of gelation ability. So we tested for petrol, diesel, and if you see 0.3% and 0.3% for petrol and diesel for both of them, and it was very good. So it was very promising. So it worked with both D and L expectedly, and there was nothing surprising about that. So once we got that, we started to look at ways to how to utilize this gelation property. Now but before that, we characterized each of these gels, and you can see from the SEM images that there is truly an entangled fiber bundle network in each of these gels. So we carried out the FSM analysis of all the gels, and you can discretely see for the entangled fiber network in these gels. We also carried out the AFM analysis, and from the AFM analysis, we could some of these fibers have chirality in them. They are helical. So we were able to find some degree of this. We are not able to resolve this to a very good extent. But anyway, some of this shows that the twistings in the fibers, that there were twistings, and it could be that they were helical in nature, but that is a different issue. We did not go into that further. So we are also now, for the testing of gel, what is for a scientific definition of gel, the rheology tests have to be carried out. Rheology is a measure of the storage modulus compared to the loss modulus. Particularly when you put some solid material under stress and it regains its shape or it loses its shape, if it is able to, under that influence of that stress, if it is able to flow, then it is more like liquid, and if it is able to rebound, then it is more like solid. So the storage modulus has to be greater, that is represented by G prime, has to be greater than the G double prime, which is the loss modulus. If the storage modulus, denoted here in red line, is greater than the loss modulus, then it has somewhat of a elastic nature, and it is a more or less elastic solid. So it is not a fluid anymore. So that was the proof, that was the scientific evidence that this is indeed forming a gel. So once we did that, we characterized all the gels, and I have shown here only some for the benzene gel, but we did it for all the other ones also. Once we did that, we tried to gel crude oil. Now, yes, yes, yes. Somebody saying something? No?
No, no. Oh, please continue. Please
Okay, okay.
continue.
There was a noise in the background. Okay, okay, okay. No, okay. So until that time, the gelation of crude oil had not been reported by anybody. This was mainly because the gelators, one of the reasons was that the gelation of crude oil, many people were working on it. Some groups in India, some groups abroad, they were working on it, but till then the gelation of crude oil had not been reported. So we tested our gelator for the gelation of crude oil also. And once we did that, we found that it was able to gel crude oil at concentrations of 0.5% weight by volume. This was interesting. And once we did that, now gelation of crude oil is one thing. Gelation of crude oil in the presence of water is a different thing. And particularly because our compound had hydroxyl groups, free hydroxyl groups, and then again it had a labile acetonide protection. So when we wanted to apply, when we wanted to test it for real world applications for oil spill remediation that generally happens in oceans, we simulated an experiment. So what we did was we simulated seawater by using a brine solution, and then on top of the brine solution, we poured the crude oil. After pouring the crude oil into the sample vial, what we did was we used a hot solution of the gelator in petrol, that was our acetonide compound, on the petrol, and let it rest for some time. In less than 30 seconds, what happened was that the crude oil solidified, and then we were able to invert this, and basically we can see that it is a solid form. So basically what happens is that if you are able to add a hot solution of the gelator to any oil spill, so in theory, conceptually, it could be applicable to remediation of oil spills in nature, in real world settings. Okay, so we were able to publish this in ChemCom in 2014, and this was the first report of crude oil gelation. We were also doing it for other purposes, for asymmetric reactions in a gel matrix. Okay, so that was also part of the job, but I'll restrict myself here to only talking about the oil spill remediation part of this work. Okay, so and then after this, in 2015, Khanna and Sureshan published same thing using another gelator, a galactose-based gelator from Isaac Trivandrum, and then there was a very active Chinese group from by the name of Zheng, who published a lot of work on this. Now, after we moved on from here. If you look at it, the compound that we had a very labile acetonide protection. Again, it was a reducing sugar because it had a free anomeric aldehyde, hydroxy group. Now, the labile nature of the acetonide protection made it very unfavorable for real-world applications of oil spill remediation. If I should point out at this time that basically crude oil are of two kinds. One is normal crude oil. The other one is sour crude oil. Of hydrogen sulfide, it has trace amounts of other acidic gases, and if you are trying to gel sour crude oil with our first generation gelator, I would bet that it would fail because the acetonide protection would be gone under the acidic and moist conditions present on the spilled oil over the ocean, so it would not work. So next we tried to design some more stable arabinose-based gelators for gelation of crude oil. Now, for this purpose, what we did was we made some triazolyl arabinoside derivatives, and we wanted to test them for their gelation ability. For this purpose, a series of triazolyl arabinosides were synthesized, mainly starting from arabinose, very simple normal carbohydrate chemistry. What you do is you carry out a O-acetylation over there, and after treatment with PBr3, you convert it to the anomeric bromide, and the treatment of the anomeric bromide with sodium azide in DMF, plain simple SN2 type reactions, gives you the equatorial azido group. Now this, when treated to the click chemistry conditions in the presence of an alkyne, gives you the triazole. We made a series of triazoles and we tested them for the gelation ability, and we found that the phenyl glycoside and the carbomethoxy triazole derivatives were the ones that were able to gel different solvents. The rest were inactive. They were not able to form gels. Okay. So as I told you before, it is a very it requires a very delicate balance of the different hydrophobic and hydrophilic interactions and different kinds of other interactions, pi-pi interactions and hydrogen bonding interactions for the carbomethoxy group to enable gelation or otherwise. So these are the two gelators. TG1 is the phenyl glycoside and the phenyl triazolyl glycoside, and the TG2 is the carbomethoxy triazolyl glycoside. These were able to gel normal aromatic hydrocarbon solvents like benzene, toluene, xylenes, chlorobenzene. It was also, this was the first time that we also saw, in the previous case we did not see their ability to gel polar protic solvents like ethanol. These two gelators were also able to gel ethanol, as well as petrol, diesel and crude oil. So once again, we were lucky and we were able to get something that was able to gel crude oil. So again, we carried out the rheological test, and we found that the take-home message from this slide is that on increasing the concentration of the gelator, the strength of the gels increased. Expectedly, this is expected, and this has been reported most of the times. Very rarely it goes otherwise. Secondly, what we found was that the properties, the mechanical properties or the strength of the gel from the carbomethoxy triazolyl gelator was higher than the phenyl glycoside gelator, phenyl triazolyl glycoside gelator. So with this background, we carried out the crude oil gelation of these using these two compounds, and we found, first we did some basic studies. We did performed the gelation of petrol, diesel, etc. in biphasic mixtures. So what we did was again repeated the same kind of experiment. We had water, saline or normal, over it a layer of oil, added the solution of the gelator in petrol or diesel or even ethyl acetate. Okay, and then the gel solidified, the oil layer solidified, we extracted it, and after extraction what we did was we recovered the oil. So this was the proof of concept that the oil could be recovered from there. We also recovered the gelator and we showed that it could be reused. So this was again done with both the gelators and for petrol, diesel and all of it. But we could not do it for crude oil because crude oil requires some higher temperatures, which we are unable to generate in the distillation of crude oil requires higher temperatures, which were unable to do, unsafe in our current lab situation. So after that, we carried out the distillation of crude oil. We tested the rheological properties of the crude oil. We saw that previously, if you see, this is a pure crude oil. If you see, the loss modulus is higher. The G double prime is higher than the storage modulus. So after gelation, what happens is that the pure crude oil. Okay, this is all for pure crude oil. So in all these cases, different kinds of experiments with rheology, what we found was that the storage modulus was less than the loss modulus. So it was behaving like a fluid. And then after we converted it into the gel, we found that the storage modulus went above the loss modulus. So then we were able to confirm quantitatively that the gel formation had occurred. Now, if you look at this, these are measures for this is a very technical term which gives us a ratio of the tan delta G to G prime, which gives us a measure of the strength of the relative gel, the gel formed gels. If you look at it, the gamma and the higher the gamma value, the more robust or strong is the gel. The lower the tan delta value, the stronger is the gel. So once again, by comparison of these two, this is for the phenyl substituted one, and this is the carbomethoxy substituted one. We could prove that the carbomethoxy was the one that was a better gelator for crude oil than the phenyl triazolide glycoside. So with this, we carried out again different examples of fractional distillations, recovery from biphasic mixture. This is also called phase selective organogelation because it gels only one phase, the oil phase, and not the water phase. So we demonstrated this. We did it for crude oil. We could recover the crude oil, and once we did that, we were able to. Okay, so we have a video here. So this is a video of an experiment that we performed, and you can see that how fast the gelation is. I'll share this video with you. So this, what we are doing here is we are pouring water into a sample vial, and then we'll pour some crude oil over it. Around 2 ml, I think. 2 ml of crude oil we poured over it. And once that happened, we had a previously made hot solution of the gelator in a carrier solvent like petrol or ethyl acetate. I think this is petrol, and then we add it to the crude oil, and then we let it stand for a few minutes. And then after a few minutes, what we found was that the gel solidified, the oil layer solidified. We could invert the vial, and then this proved that the phase selective organogelation of the crude oil was possible, and then it could be applied for, and theoretically, conceptually, it could be applied for remediation of oil spills. This was a video that we did, and again, we recovered the crude oil also from there because it was a solid. Now it could be easily removed. You can see it in the video. Next page. So it's like a gel, very difficult to bring out from the vial, from the small neck of the bottle that's stuck there. You'll see that it is a solid, and then we were able to so this is a useful concept for, and theoretically it could be applied for oil spill remedy, but it has a problem. It again had a problem in the sense that this solvent that we are using for the remediation of the crude oil spill is as the carrier solvent. This is the carrier solvent that we are using, that we added initially for adding the gelator, and this are generally organic solvents. Associated with organic solvents is their toxicity, their volatile nature. If you are trying to use it on a large scale for remediation of oil spill in, say, the Bay of Bengal or anywhere else, you are basically adding a lot of volatile organic solvents to the environment. So this is not a very good method. So we were working on the next part, which is trying to develop an organogelator that could be added to the crude oil in the powder form, so that the gelation occurred after the powder got dissolved in it. Okay, so next what we tried was that we published the previous one in RSC Advances, and then we next tried to work on something else, tried to design more compounds that would be able to gel the crude oil in their dry powder form. So dispersal of this large volume of liquid into the ocean is also problematic. You need a huge aircraft carrier to go and fly over the oil spill area and then spray the solution of the gelator on the crude oil. So that is also a problem. So that prompted us to work towards developing organogelators that could gel crude oil at basically by adding powder. So next we tried to design arabinose based gelators by carrying out simple protection of the 1,2. If you remember the first gelator that we talked about, we had protections at the 3,4 of the arabinose. Now we wanted to see if we could make gelators using protections only at C1 and C2 hydroxyl groups. So for that, we tried. What we did was we basically made converted the D-arabinose into the acetonide, 3,4 acetonide, carried out the acetylation over there. Okay, there's a ring flipping over there. So what happens is this one undergoes acetylation, and then you have a ring flipping over there, and then we remove the acetonide protection to get the only 1,2-di protected compound. So this was a fairly simple organic chemistry and normal carbohydrate chemistry, and we got this compound in pure form. Okay, so after we got this compound, we tested its gelation ability. It was able to gel. This is for the acetate protections. We made a series of compounds with different protection with different esters of different acids. And once we did that, we found that the acetate protections, 1,2-diacetate, 1,2-di, and the 1,2-dibenzoate were able to selectively gel different organic solvents. So we again carried out the different rheological tests. We found that the benzoate was more effective, giving more mechanically robust gels. But the problem was we characterized these gels. Okay, we characterized these gels using SEM, and again we could see that the entangled network formation was there. Okay, and then we carried out this, and in trying to find out why the benzoate gels were more mechanically robust, we found out that the fibers from the benzoate gels were thinner, 29 nanometer, than the acetate gels. Now, if the concept in polymer chemistry is that the thinner the fibers, the more, if you have a material made out of thinner fibers, it gives a mechanically more robust material. So the thinner fibers in this case led to the more mechanically robust gels for the benzoate gel. Now, once we did that, we tried to find out what were the reasons for this, and we found out for the acetate gel, it was pure hydrogen bonding. For the benzoate gel, that resulted in the self-assembly. For the benzoate gels, in addition to the hydrogen bondings, what else was happening was that we was having considerable amount of pi-pi stacking interactions, which led to the more thinner fibers, more compact formation of the fibers in case of the benzoate gels. We also tested this for gelation ability of the crude oil in the powder form. Unfortunately, it did not work. Anyway, these results were significant enough. We were able to publish this in Chemistry European Journal. But nevertheless, our purpose for treating this, using this compound to for the remediation of oil spill was not effective. So next, what we did was we tried to make another class of compounds. This is a very simple compound, making phenolic glycosides. Okay, again, one step from this commercially available arabinose or arabinose derivatives. Actually, what we did here was we made a series of 32 compounds with all the pentose sugars. So alpha, beta, and then 4 isomers of each compound, or normal phenyl glycoside, orthomethoxyphenyl glycoside, metamethoxy, and recently we have also done the paramethoxy. So we made all these compounds, we tested them, and we found that this compound 2B was an effective geller of organic solvents. Now, once we found out that, we tried to, because our purpose, now we were more focused in our approach, we did not try the different kinds of solvents. We tried to gel only the petroleum distillates, kerosene, petrol, diesel, and paraffin oil and crude oil, hexane. We tried to gel all of these solvents with the compounds. We found that only 2B, that is the orthomethoxy compound, was able to gel benzene, kerosene, petrol, diesel, paraffin oil. It did not work with paraffin oil, and then with crude oil. So once this happened, we were now in a position to test whether it could act as a gelator for crude oil in the dry powder form. So again, this is the same image. We can once again see the tangled fiber network. And once we got that, we tried to gel it by the solution carrier solvent based dispersal method that we had used previously. Now, as I told you before, the carrier, it worked fine with the carrier solvent gelation of carrier solvent based gelation of crude oil. So what basically happened was crude oil carrier based is involved with several kinds of disadvantages: toxicity of the carrier solvents, volatile nature of the carrier solvent, logistical problems like how to spray over a large volume. You need tons and tons of the solution to be sprayed over a large area of the spilled oil. So next we tried to see whether it could gel crude oil by it being used in the dry powder form. So what we basically did was we added a fixed volume of, we took a fixed volume of crude oil, and to it we added a little bit of a weighed amount of the solid powder form. Now, if you look at it, if the loading of the powder in the crude oil was 0.25%, which is very near, it was for the minimum gelation concentration for the crude oil was here, I have it here, 0.2%. It is actually 0.2%. I don't have the data here, but it is actually 0.2%. So what basically happened was that if we are using at 0.25%, which is near to the minimum gelation concentration, the time of gelation in the dry powder form, it took 12 hours for the crude oil to gelate. This is expected because you need the gelator to permeate into the bulk of the crude oil, and once it is able to permeate and disperse into the bulk of the crude oil, only then can it form the network and gelation can happen. So it took a lot of time because this was in very small concentration. If you increase the concentration to 0.5%, the gelation occurred of 1 ml of the liquid in 1 hour. If it was 1%, it was less than 15 minutes. Mind you, this we are adding in the, we are not heating up the solution, we are not adding the gelator in the solution, and we are not heating up the solution. We are just adding the gelator and letting it stay there. And if we used it in 2%, it was gelled in less than 30 seconds. So now once we have this result, what we could see was that the gelation of crude oil, near instantaneous gelation of crude oil, could be carried out without heating the crude oil and adding the gelator in the dry powder form only at very high concentrations of 2%. So if you're looking at real world applications of 2% for dispersion, for solidification of crude oil in ranges of hundreds of tons, it is a huge amount of the gelator that would be required. So this was disadvantage. This was not going to go anywhere. So next, what we did was, okay, I have a video here, and this shows the gelation of the crude oil at 2% weight loadings in less than 30 seconds. So we have the crude oil there, and once we have the crude oil, we'll be adding the gelator in the powder form. And we'll just then let it rest. We'll not heat it. For making the normal gels, what we do is we add the powder and then we heat it up so that it gets dissolved. Now we are not heating it up to dissolve. We'll just let it stay there. So this was the work done by my student. The first part of the work was done by my first student, Raj Kamal. This part of the work has been done by my current student, Navendu Prakash Pathak. So you can see that within 30 seconds, in less than 30 seconds, what happened was the crude oil became a solid. Okay, so now, but as I told you before, this was non-trivial problem, because you needed 2% of the gelator, which was not going to work anywhere in real life application. So what we did was, now, at this point, I would like to tell you a little bit about the background, how the gelation occurs. When we are heating it up, when we are trying to make gels by adding the solid gelator and then heating it up, we are making a solution. We are ensuring the homogeneous distribution of the gelator into the bulk of the solvent. And once you let it cool, it starts precipitating or crystallizing, and then you form the network from the homogeneous, and then from the homogeneous mixture solution, and then you form the network in which the solvent is trapped. Now, when we are adding a solid gelator, what is the drawback is that the solid gelator you are adding in a small part of the bulk of the solvent. Now it has to disperse into the medium. It takes some time. This time is what is reflected in the gelation times when we are doing the gelation without heating. Because once we are not heating, what happens is it takes time to disperse into the bulk of the solution. So now we thought we could disperse the material better into the bulk of the solution by just simply creating a blend of the gelator with something else. Starch, a polymer is a natural choice. So what you have is now a greater weight of the gelator polymer blend. You spread it out, it's a more amount of material, but the material is cheap because the gelator is required in less amount and the support or the polymer is there in the more amount. So what we did was we prepared gelator polymer blends using starch. Starch is eco-friendly, cheap, easily available. So we chose starch and we made starch gelator blends by just dissolving the starch and the gelator in a solvent, dichloromethane or any other ethyl acetate. You take both of them together, mix them up in the solvent, heat it up to dissolve, and then you let evaporate the solvent. So what you now have is effectively a solid material, starch, coated with the gelator molecules. So now if you add it to the mixture, what you have is a greater mass of the dispersed thing, the solid, and it is able to percolate and disperse into the medium more effectively and faster. So we made different kinds of gelator starch blends, using different ratios. We used 1:1 starch gelator, 2:3, 1:2, and 1:3. And then we tried to see what was the volume of liquid that it could gel in less than 30 seconds. Okay, because we need the gelation to happen instantaneously. So if you look at GSP1, that is the gelator starch blend with 1:1 of starch and gelator, it was able to gel 3.5 ml of the crude oil in less than 30 seconds without heating, mind you. And if you look at GSP2, which is 2:3, it could gel 3 ml in less than 30 seconds. If we had more of the crude oil, then it took longer time. That was the maximum volume it could gel. So GSP3 could gel 2.5 ml and GSB4 could gel only 1 ml. So once we were reasonably sure, confident that this was going to work, and this is going to work in less than 30 seconds, and this was the maximum volume of solvent 3.5 ml that could be gelled, we proceeded ahead with the gelation of crude oil using this blend, GSP1, that contained 1:1 starch and gelatin. Once we did that, the next experiment that needed to be performed was whether it was able to gel the crude oil from biphasic mixtures of crude oil and water. So we did that. We did that experiment by simulating oceanic water, seawater, using brine solution, pouring a liquid layer of crude oil over it, and then adding the dry powder blend, and we could see that it could happen over there. These are the images from a video that I have next, and I'll show you the video, and I hope this will make it more clear. So what we did was basically we made, so this was in large volume compared to the previous one. So we poured oil over the crude oil, saline water, and then we added the dry powder. And you could see that it is instantly becoming solid. We could just scoop it out . And then you see what remains behind is a pure water. And the crude oil has completely solidified, leaving behind only the water. So this is again an experiment that we did, and we also published this video. So again, we recently published this in ChemCom. Okay, Navendu Pathak was the main person behind this work. And so this brings us, now we are in a fairly good position where we can utilize this gelatinous polymer blend for oil spill remediation. And then, of course, now I am coming to the end of my talk. So what are the conclusions? Okay, we reported for the first time the gelation of crude oil, okay, using a gelator. It was unstable. The gelator was not very good for applications for remediation of oil spills involving sour crude. So we designed a second generation, which was more stable, more robust. It was stable under a fairly acidic conditions. But then the problem associated with it was that it had to be used in solution form. Okay, either you have to heat up the crude oil for its gelation, or you have to add the gelator as a hot solution to the crude oil. Next, we tried working with another one. It did not work. The acetate and the benzoate gelators, it did not work in the dry powder form. So, but then the fourth generation one, which is fairly stable, it has a few advantages. It is synthesized in bulk in just one simple step from commercially available materials. It is useful for gelation of crude oil at very low concentrations, 0.2%, and then it can also be used in the dry powder form as a polymer gelator blend. That could be useful because it could be easily dispersed over a large area of land or sea water over which oil has been spilled. Now, where do we go from here next? Okay, so all this is useful. So next is obviously we want to decrease the loadings further. Point 2, we want to go So lesser than that, lower than that, we want to have gelator polymer blends that are useful not in 1:1, but less than 1:4 or 1:5 ratio that is effective. And then, of course, that would also lower the cost and bring up the effectivity. And then we have a very vibrant petroleum engineering department here, and we have strong ties. ISM has strong ties with ONGC, IOCL, all of it. And so next, what we plan to do is go for pilot testing. You have various oil rigs here and oil platforms where oil wells, where nearby oil leakages, crude oil leakages happen, and then what you have is that the nearby pools, ponds, lakes, they get contaminated with the crude oil. So we could test there in those things. So that is the next stage that we are planning for. Okay, thank you all. And before I go, I want to acknowledge for finance, money is essential always. Otherwise, nothing can be done. So DST SCRB for funding CSIR and also IIT ISM Dhanbad. My students here, they did most of the work. Most of them. Dr. Raj Kamal, he was my first PhD student. He worked mainly on arabinose-based gels. This is Raj Kamal. He's in an industry in Hyderabad. Devnath Chatterjee recently completed his PhD thesis. He is also in Jubilant in Noida. Abhijit Paul, again in a company in Hyderabad. Navendu Pathak, he's the other person working on this gels. This is Navendu, and he's currently working on this, and he's also working on asymmetric reactions based on chiral gels. Tanmay Haldar, he's doing oligosaccharide synthesis, mainly bacterial polysaccharides for vaccine development. Saurabh Nayak is working on chondroitin sulfate. Aditya Paul, he's working on photoredox. I have some work going on also in photoredox catalysis. Sachidanand, asymmetric synthesis based on carbohydrate based organocatalysts. And Sunil Kumar Yadav, he joined us recently. He's working on chondroitin sulfate. So thank you all. Thank you very much. I would like, if you have any questions.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jadhav.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much
for your well informative lecture. Hope all of us are enriched by this. I have seen some questions in the chat box. May I ask, please, sir, one by one?
Okay, where is the chat box?
Yes, yes. Sir, please. I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
First question, Rona came trick, I think, that is displayed in my chat box, that a large amount of gelator used. What about it?
Okay, could you be more? A large amount of gelator used. Okay. So initially, 0.2% is not very large. If you go by the literature reports that the precedents that have reports on the gelators, 1%, 2% is the normal deal. 0.2%, 0.5% is not a large amount. But of course, when you're talking about real world applications for gelation of crude oil, these are high. But this, again, this is surely in an experimental stage. This is a work in progress. We want to go further. We want to decrease the loading further. We have been able to do that, decrease the loadings of the gelator to some extent. If you look at it, 1:1 polymer blend of 1 milligram for gelation of 3.5 ml is not a very high amount. It effectively with one gram of the polymer gelator hybrid blend that you have, you can gel around 100 ml of crude oil. Okay, so that means 500 milligram of the crude oil for 500 milligram of the gelator for 100 ml of crude oil. 100 ml is around 130 or 140 grams of crude oil. Oh, I'm not sure. With respect to weight, I'm not sure. It is lighter than water. so it should be less than weight. But 100 ml of crude oil can be gelled with 500 milligram of our gelator.
Okay, sir. Second one was what's about L-arabinose?
Yes.
Actually, she asked her the question after taking 1 D-arabinose for making gelator. What's about L-arabinose?
Well, we are taking it. Well, as I demonstrated before, okay. L-arabinose is also works fine. No problem with that. You are not doing anything chiral over there. Okay, so D and L both work fine in the for remediation of oil spills. What could happen is that initially we were working on both. Initial slide was for both D and L because we are trying also to do something else with this. We are trying to make our organocatalysts out of this D and L because for catalysis we need both enantiomers of the catalyst, right? Otherwise you don't get the desired stereochemistry with one enantiomer.
Okay, sir. Next one is, can be gelator reused?
Pardon, I cannot hear you.
Actually, next one is, can be gelator reused?
Can the gelator be reused? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be reused from if you are able to recover it. We have done that for the distillates, for the purer solvents like petrol, diesel. We have recovered the gelator, but with crude oil it is a little bit difficult. Crude oil, it is a little bit difficult because once you distill the crude oil, it requires a very high temperature. Once you expose the gelator to that kind of temperature, being an organic molecule, you may not be able to recover it once again. But it is theoretically possible because if you are able to do chromatographic separation of the crude mixture, the residue left over from the after the distillation of the crude oil. But mind you, that is a non-trivial job. That is a very difficult job because not only does it have the gelator, crude oil also has a mixture. The tar that you get, pitch, alcatra that you get is basically the residue of crude oil distillation. So extracting anything, isolating anything from there is very difficult. So it would not be a very feasible idea.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Last one question I am asking, sir. Last question.
Yes.
Is there any clear image which will separately show a number of interactions that are present during self-assembly between any crude oil part? Just like an example, and gelator.
No, for gelation of crude oil, we try to get the FESM and the same images, but it is very complicated. It's basically a very complicated. You cannot find out the fibers in there because of the huge complexity and the inhomogeneity of the mixture. Okay, it is very difficult to get the FESM image from for the gels from crude oil. For petrol, diesel, any other solvent, it is okay, but for crude oil, it is very difficult. We have not been able to get that.
Okay, sir. Thanks again. Lastly, I am requesting to all, if they have any queries, please contact to sir through email IDs. That will be given later, actually. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be
okay.
I'd be happy. And if there are students, ISM Dhanbad has a very good master's program. Okay, this is for the students. It has a very good master's program. We are also having a master's program in pharmaceutical sciences and engineering. We are introducing it from this year. So if you are able to clear JAM, you could join here as a master's student in either in chemistry or in MTech in pharmaceutical science and engineering. We need people from chemistry background there. Okay, so that is the option. It is a very, particularly the MTech Pharma program is a very industry-oriented course, and we have, in developing the curriculum and the course structure of this, what we have done is we have consulted lots of industries, all the famous biotech industries that you have, pharmaceutical industries that you have, including Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, all of them. We have consulted them, and they will be participating with us in the execution of that course. So students, you are welcome to come here.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.